Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue on with our series and winning with the closed Sicilian. We're looking at a game between Julian Hodgson um, and with the white pieces and Colin Crouch with the black pieces. This game took place in Scotland, 1987. E4, C5, knight C3, knight C6, G3, G6, bishop G2, bishop G7, D3, D6, and here you have the choice between knight E2, knight H3, knight F3, F4 even, and here we're discussing the line bishop E3. Again, I'm going to have a big gigantic playlist with nothing but closed Sicilian games, broken down by the various lines for you to be able to get your full fix in when you're ready to get into this opening. So here bishop e3 just has the simple idea of forming a battery with queen d2 and then in typical Sicilian fashion trading off the dragon bishop, so to speak, in a Sicilian. Knight f6, h3, just preventing the typical motif of knight g4. Colin Crouch plays queen b6. This move attacks the b pawn as well as supports d4. Of course, more typical is rook b8, preparing the pawn storm on the queen side with a move like b5, planning on b4. Of course, a6 gets involved in the mix, and then with this bishop here on this diagonal, exerts tremendous amount of pressure on the queen side for black. Here, Crouch plays a move queen b6. Julian plays rook b1. I like rook b1 instead of falling into some type of tactical nonsense along the diagonal. Even though there, is obvious tactical themes here. For instance, knight takes d4. It's just in general a general principle to observe, even when there is no, tactics available. Let's just say, for example, this pawn is here, and let's just imagine now, and let's just make some like a bizarre move, right? In this position, normally you would want to defend. It's one of the principles Stein has laid down a long time ago, where you have to defend such things like this. If you can defend without moving the pawns, if you can defend with a piece, is better, because the bottom line is that your pawn moves are more committal and permanent, right? So for you to create a permanent weakness at the beginning of the game, for instance, as you see here, right? Not saying black white is lost or anything like that, but to create a permanent pawn weakness in the structure at the beginning of the game is pretty anti-positional. If you do it with a piece, if you defend, let's just go back here. If you defend with the piece can be shuffled back and forth. Okay, it's not a permanent, like a permanent committal move. So in the game here, of course, at the h3, queen b6, rook b1. And you might say, well, that's a bad place for the rook. Of course, at this moment it is, but you have to remember, too, the nature of the position. It's a closed position. And in closed positions, there usually is a lot of space and time for maneuvering the pieces and such. You can get away with moves like this. You can move the rook to b1 and then later on move it to an open file, because of the closed nature of the position. So those are just general things to think about, right? Normally you don't want to, when faced with a situation like that, you don't want to play a move like b3. Even though here, of course, you get destroyed tactically because of the threats on the diagonal. But even if this bishop wasn't here, you still normally wouldn't want to do that. Okay, you defend with a piece, And then later on, you can move the piece, and then your pawns are, still intact. All right, rook b1, castle, knight ge2. Of course, f4 is possible right away, knight f3, and it's just a matter of, what kind of game you're looking for. Of course, knight ge2 doesn't obstruct the f pawn. Knight to d4, castle, and now e5. Now this firmly secures d4. All right. Now f4, bishop to e6. The king comes to h2. This is a typical motif, getting off of this diagonal. Knight takes e2, and queen takes e2. Okay, so black is his piece is a little bit worse than white due to preponderance of these pawns on the dark squares. Um, his pieces aren't as well placed for the attack as white is. White has a little bit more potential here as far as his piece placement. Not that black is lost or anything, but in other words, white is able to get things started first. All right, and black has to be careful so that he can meet white's attack when it does come. So he plays e takes f4. All right, opening up the diagonal for this bishop, and also f4, f5 is a legitimate worry. Okay, so what he does is he plays this move, e takes f4, g takes f4, and now rook f to e8, and now queen f2. All right, so it's a good prophylactic move. You see the rook lined up on the e file, gets the queen out of there. All right, and also good idea, right? Because now you can show that you might be planning to shift the queen over there to the king side for an attack. Rook a d8. Okay, so now he's trying to work on getting this d5 in there. King h1, just making sure again there's no gimmicks, right, against the king. This makes a nice move. So there's no tactics based on moves like bishop e5 later on, knight h5 and stuff like that. Once this pawn is advanced, you see, once the pawn is advanced, the dark squares become vulnerable. This shows the superiority of white's position. When you have time to make moves like that, it shows you got a good position. You can just take your time. The opponent can't really do too much. So king h1 is played. Knight h5. All right. Bishop f3, and now f5. Okay, so what is he gonna do? He wanted to stop this move, but now his king side gets ripped open. Rook g1, king h8. Okay, so Colin Crouch is saying, "Come and get me. I'll just simply bring the rook over here." Okay, and protect everything, So and this trade off. However, it's White's move, and he's dealing with Julian Hodgson, who is a renowned tactician. Rook takes g7, and wow, I mean, it's incredible blow. King takes g7. The other rook comes in. King h8. He's looking for the same idea. And then knight a4, and Colin Crouch was forced to resign. Powerful game. Okay, why did he resign? Well, the queen is attacked. Now let's say he plays queen b4. Simply c3, giving up the knight. Queen takes B3. The idea is to keep the queen from guarding the D4 square. That's all it's about. Queen C6, and now bishop D4, C takes D4, and queen D4. Right? That's an assault on the dark squares. That's why we start with the move knight A4. Notice how the queen is is still monitoring this square right here. So if bishop D4 here, there's no sacrifice. So knight B4 deflects the queen off the protection of that square. Right? I hope you can see that. So after king H8, knight A4, queen B4, of course, in an attempt to stay there. C3 here, and then B3. Now what? You either give up the queen. So then after queen C6, then you have this sacrifice. So very powerful move. 22 move demolition by Hodgson in the closed Sicilian. So again, even though it's generally a closed game, um, realize that there's a lot of attacking potential in these games, and one of the main themes for white is this constant threat of F4, F5 here. And what often happens is that black, in trying to stop that, will create other weaknesses in his position. So after F5, you see trying to stop white's F5, he gets his king side ripped open, and then you see this quick occupation of the file and the rapid attack. And also notice the thematic play with the removal of black's bishop, right? The dark squares, right? The G file and the A1 to H8 diagonal just become wide open for for white to use, and this leads to the quick downfall. So again, there's another barn burner for you, and I hope you like and subscribe, and also check the links down below. Um, and I'll see you on the next video.